Welcome to another edition of the GEB America podcast. Today it is the David and Stephen co-host conversation time, a little special edition. Having some good conversations about something that's coming out in the Christian media world. Want to have a sit down, maybe some thoughts. People are already aware of it, but maybe you're not, and want to bring some attention to it and answer some of those questions people might have. So, David, tell us what are we so excited to talk about today?
Yeah, well, so of late we've had people asking us, what do you think of some of the faith-based films, releases, series that are out? There's a lot of them, and as many people know, if you follow the podcast, we've interviewed a number of directors and actors, actresses, and that sort of thing. So what we wanted to do is to talk a little bit. We were asked recently about what do you think of the new series from Amazon MGM, House of David, which is out if you have Prime. When this podcast drops, as of that period, there are 3 episodes available, so you can binge the first 3.
Can one stone change the course of history?
Cowards! Send me your champion! Goliath!
Can one act of defiance create the legend? I will tell you the story of David, a simple shepherd boy.
Why do my brothers get to fight? And I'm stuck here.
David, you are not a man of blood.
An outcast who became one of the most famous kings who ever lived.
God does not see what man sees. He sees into the heart. And you have the heart of a lion.
The Philistines have assembled. I saw the print of a hand, larger than a weaver's basket.
They have a giant.
What?
My king, I will fight the giant.
Fight him with the same spirit you bring into this room.
You play music for my father. Now he chooses you as champion. How will you do this?
It's not about the greatness of the giant. It is about the greatness of God.
Are you afraid?
Terrified.
I believe in you.
So, as the fate of a people hangs in the balance, again I ask this question. Can one stone change the course of history?
And so we just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that and, break it down a little bit. No spoilers. We're going to do our very best to, if you haven't seen a single episode after this podcast, you're going to want to go watch for sure. And as they say in the financial world, do your own research. We're not Siskel and Ebert, although everybody Gen Z, younger, you have no idea who that is. But for you Gen X and Boomers, you know who I'm talking about. So I think he is Siskel and I'll be Ebert. Now,
There you go.
so right off the bat, let's just talk about, the elephant in the room, which is this idea of creative license. There's been some criticism over the years about Bible-based films. And the fact that we don't know conversations and stories between characters. The Chosen has done this really well. This dialogue between the disciples and each other and Jesus. But talk a little bit about that, Stephen. What was your thoughts initially?
Well, I think one of the things, that conversations between characters that, for example, maybe, a relative, of David's, a relative of, in the Saul, in the king's court type of thing, those kind of conversations that aren't specifically lined out, but that historically would make sense to somebody who was going to be in that time frame and going through that? And are you loyal to, King Saul or King David? Are you loyal, to those? And then, so what's those conversations going to have? So those kind of things, I think. And then, of course, you get some background maybe on, David's family. And so,
right.
Why was there this outcast, feeling of David? Why was he always out in the, yes, he was the youngest, and yes, that was an obligation, but why was he always out there? Was there some solitude? Was there some way of kind of seeking some peace, out in those fields and hearing the voice of God? And I think that's kind of, they tell that story really well. And I will say this, I have not gotten even through all of the 3 episodes. I am middle way, and I can't wait to watch the next ones. They are exciting and definitely tell the story. It brings you into the concept of what someone would be going through and what someone who had gone through those events would be, David particularly and his family, how they would see the war and the battles and walking through that in a whole different light, I think, than maybe just the kind of traditional ways. And it also makes me think, and I'll let you hear your thoughts on this too, but it also makes me think back to when it was during our time, David, it was the Prince of Egypt, that kind of portrayal of a Bible, really Bible story. And the first time, I think, Millie, that we had seen a portrayal of this wall of water, right, of them going across, and this massive walls of water on either side. And I think they even have like whales, you can see a whale, swimming by. That kind of a level of detail of things of that you don't necessarily see just on the pages of the Bible. But if you let yourself be creative and think what that would have really been, I think that's kind of where they're going with this. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think, I try to, with programs like this, I try to look at it from a perspective of, what if, like I was raised, but I had a grandmother take me to Sunday school when I was like 3. I learned all those Old Testament stories as a young boy. But for those that may be out there, you just don't know, maybe you don't have that basis in the Bible. Maybe the Bible is new to you. Maybe you are considering considering this person of Jesus in the Bible, or maybe you're just someone that maybe you just don't have a lot of background. One of the most intriguing things to me is that this is a story that I don't think has been dramatically played, really, truly, and done right in film, ever. I mean, what an incredible story with so many story arcs. And it starts with 1000 BC, and David is the shepherd boy, and he's for those of you who know the story, a lot like Joseph. His brothers treated him poorly. He was just a kid. They're like, look, you can't go to the battle. A little background too is that King Saul was the first king of Israel, and he had been anointed by Samuel the prophet. And this is historical facts that he fought the Amalekites, fought the Philistines. During that era, they were the only, understood, group of people that was following, and worshiping one God. There wasn't this idolatry, and lots of gods in the ancient world. And so the fact that it's really the first quality production about the story, and starting with him as a youth and moving forward. And I want to say that right from the very beginning is that, you're not going to be distracted by lack of production quality. It's for sure. Well done. Bravo to Wonderco. And for those of you that are familiar with the Irwin Brothers, so this was part of one of the companies that they started, and so this is a production of theirs. So they have a real, I would say, commitment to high quality and it looking a certain way. What was your thoughts on that?
No, I think the quality level was very strong. I recognize one of the actors playing, David's father, as being a very well-renowned, accomplished actor. And so this is not just a fly-by-night kind of, let's just see who we can just get somebody in here. They have sourced properly, really well-talented, well-achieving, well-talented, and new coming, I think, great talent into the media world of Christian to portrayal. I hope that there's more, out of the same studio for this. This is what they bring for this story. My goodness, what else can they tell with this caliber of excellence? And I think that's what you really get a picture of. I love the use of the whole flashback, flash forward type thing, where you're using seeing something in the history and how that portrays and carries into now. And it's very well done. Very, very good, high caliber of production quality.
Well, and for those of you that are familiar with movies like Jesus Revolution, John Irwin and the Wonder Project are the people behind this. He's done an excellent job with so many different things in the past, and I do want to say that right from the beginning you're pulled in. I think they did a great job of just catching your attention. We know how important it is to seize attention. And, the thing that struck me too in the beginning was this idea that, they're a little bit of an establishment and a little bit of a flashback, because for those of us that, know the story, we know there's a huge showdown coming mid-teens for David. Right. And that's with the Philistine giant warrior, which is portrayed excellently. And his brothers, by the way, as being the giant, the 9-10 foot tall Goliath.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, even that little key point they just mentioned is sometimes skipped over, is it wasn't just Goliath by himself. They're now on the battlefield. Yeah, on the battlefield, maybe, yes, but there was more. And so I think that story is definitely something, and I've heard it said, I obviously love to see how it plays out in this storytelling, but the number of stones that he picked up, according to the way the Bible tells it, happens to also be one for every one of Goliath and his siblings, and so you get the inclination that maybe there was more at play than just one takedown. And so I think that's a key part. I think that you get a little bit of the Bible wasn't just all daisies and roses and kumbaya. Like, that is not at all what the stories are. There is battles and blood, and people died, and but it was for forging the kingdom of God and kingdom of man, depending on which side they were on. And so walking through that, to see that in a way that isn't just bloody for the sake of gore. That's not at all the intent, but it's for the the level of it is within reason.
Yep. I agree
to tell the story.
So you mentioned it a minute ago. What an incredible cast! Michael Iskender as David, Ali Suleiman as Saul. Somebody that I immediately was like, wait, I recognize him, and that was Stephen Lang, who plays Samuel. For those of you that, like me, are huge Western fans, I immediately put two and two together. Stephen Lang played in Tombstone. He was Ike Clanton in the movie opposite Kurt Russell and, of course, the always entertaining Val Kilmer. And so he does an excellent job as the great prophet, Samuel. And there's so many others that you're going to recognize. Indy Lewis does a great job as his sister, and Oded Fehr, who plays the confidant Abner to King Saul. And so I think a very talented cast. The other thing I think was really great was this concept of making sure that we understand this conflict. The Bible speaks specifically about the torment of Saul once the Spirit lifted and the anointing lifted. When he disobeyed God, he took the Amalekite king. He took the spoils. He had done a number of things that God wasn't too happy with, and this was kind of the last straw. And so he said, I'm no longer happy. I'm no longer pleased with the house of Saul. And he was going to have Samuel anoint another. What the thing we know is that the tension, though, because Jesus, it's so funny. This determination of him becoming the anointed David, he didn't become the king, right? It took a number of years. I mean, it was like, I think, 12, 15 years as Saul still being king of Israel. So more than anything, I'm impressed with just the way they're setting that piece of it up. Now, I think an interesting thing, too, And I wanted to talk about this. So let's talk about the exploration of faith and leadership. So in the movie, it really does a good job, I think, in the series, the first episode, delving into this idea of this complexity of leadership between King Saul and between who will become King David. And tell me a little bit what you think, Stephen, how it struck you. We know David was God, a man after God's own heart. And early on, we see David, praying, saying, I want to be used by you, talking to God privately as a shepherd boy, and really wanting God to use him, and it being really, as Samuel says, God looks on the heart. Man looks on the outside appearance. What did you think of that part of the initial beginnings of the story?
Great point. I think that, the way it's developed with that is, the places where, like I said, he was the shepherd, for the family's flock, and tending to that. And so, you're out there in the middle of nowhere, essentially, off along the land. There's acres and acres of land that is considered their family's, Jesse's, family, of their their flock, their land to tend. And so he had quite a large area to sit, ponder, pray
under the stars, under the clouds,
and sometimes they portray some good, family tension levels of father, son. Sorry, Dad, didn't mean to say that. That that came out. That those kind of things. And so, but where does he go? He goes out to the middle of there, and he says, "Okay, Lord, I am yours." And I think I love. There's a line that he says, "Deep calls unto deep." Lord, show me who I am. And that line, I was like, "Ooh, that's really good." And
when his mother said, "You'll hear him."
Yeah, and so he closes his eyes, prays, basically to know. And of course, that scene is critical to the rest of the part. But it really is one of those that I think that he learned from those moments, both in the quiet and in the active moments of hearing and being brave too. I think they do a good job of talking about, they said, David, you picture him fast forward 20 years and he's, just fearless and, champion and all those kind of things. And yet this is where the building happens. This is where he is, in those moments of going, okay, I've got a lion that's trying to roar around and take my sheep. What am I going to do? Am I going to just sit back and wait? Or am I going to try to be, preemptive and proactive and take the battle to him? And so that you see that warring, if you will, internally and spiritually, kind of processing that for him of what he's going to do. And ultimately that was powerful.
I love how it explores faith and leadership. The second thing that I think is important for people to really watch for and to take away from, and it's an excellent thing to share with your family, your kids. It is this concept that pride obviously leads to destruction, and we know that Saul, that was part of it. But this is the other piece that I think that often gets missed in the story when we think of Saul, is that he was partially obedient. Partial obedience to God is still disobedience.
Yep.
He obeyed and wiped out the Amalekites mostly.
Right.
God told him, wipe them all out, take nothing. And he kept the king and brought him back as kind of a prize to say, look, that was a pride thing. But partial disobedience is still disobedience. And I think that the other thing is that it is possible to fall into a place where you find yourself further and further away from hearing God's voice.
Yeah.
And the more that happens, we have this disobedience. We have this. We see this with Saul, and whereas he was anointed and chosen by God and anointed by Samuel when he was younger, we see this where he starts to have this drift. And I think that it's interesting because in our culture today, there's a lot of talk about this idea of deconstruction and about people that have drifted away from the faith. And in Saul's case, he had God's favor. He was winning battles. He built Israel into the mighty historical, conquesting, group of people. But what happened to him was he forgot, I think, in some ways, who put him there.
Yeah,
He forgot about the times God came through, and the credit goes to no person, no great warrior. The credit was God's. And I think in some ways it's a good lesson for all of us to realize that, except for the grace of God, go I. we have to be careful that we are obeying fully. And so you say, well, I don't know. I don't hear God's voice all the time. How do we do it? Well, what does Scripture say? What are we supposed to be doing as believers? Are we fully obeying, or are we partially obeying?
Yeah, I think in that the Samuel, I think of the line when he comes from the Bible, when he comes into Saul's court to really essentially call him on the carpet. Mm-hmm. He says, "Why do I hear bleating sheep?" So not only did he keep the king alive, the opposing king, which was a very well portrayed crazy cannibal king, but also their livestock. They're out there in the middle of the field, and all of a sudden he's like, well, why are there sheep out here? Why are there cows? You didn't bring those out here for you guys to have a battle. That's obviously spoils of the war. And so don't take anything that is not told to be taken, right? Don't keep anything that's not supposed to be retained. That can be, and even I think there's a conversation with Jonathan, and he's with his brother in there, and they talk about the idols, little idols. It's like, why are we keeping these around? This is not supposed. He recognized, the word of Samuel, through word of God through Samuel was true and was powerful, and he needed to obey that. And yet they were like, oh, we'll just keep just a little bit here, a little bit there. And so we're as Christians, we got to remind ourselves that just a little bit goes a long way, and that goes reverse. Don't allow a little bit of sin or a little bit of idolatry or a little bit of this other things to sit in our hearts, because it can corrupt, it can derail us from the calling and the path that he's really drawing us to.
I think that the series does so far a good job of humanizing biblical figures. So let's talk about, there have been some criticisms out there, and I'm not going to specifically cite any critiques. We're not professional movie critics, although maybe this is the beginning of something for us. But one of the criticisms has been that the character's not maybe relatable enough to us. And I mean, I think that for my opinion, where I would take the opposite view, is that these are people from 1000 BC. This is from, a culture that is hard for us to wrap our head around what all went on in it. And I would say that, and I actually felt a little bit more could relate to David when I would think back to my being when I was younger. And I wasn't a shepherd boy, but one of the things I loved to do was take walks with my dog, and we lived on a farm, and just, ponder, like, why am I here, and pray. And I mean, I really feel like those were the early days of kind of learning to, kind of relate to this creator. Because at the time I was like, why am I, is there a God? And what did he put me here for? And so I actually really like some of what I hear from David. I could never play a lyre or a lyre and whatever, and sit in the woods and sing. But I related to that. So from that criticism, the high production quality and the beautiful on-scene locations, most of it, I believe, was shot in Greece. Of course, I love Greece. It's gorgeous. So we both love that part of the world. And so from that criticism, I do feel like there is some relatability. So I would disagree, but I think we can all have our own thoughts and opinions.
I think if you're looking at it from the sense of like relatability in terms of what they were going through, the battle side, the cultural differences, if that's what you're looking at in terms of saying, well, I don't understand them because I'm, in the middle of America in the 2025, and I don't have any constructs for that. Well, okay, that's fair, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is that if you open the Bible up and you're reading a story about David, you're not reading that in the filter of a high-rise building on some major city, metropolitan city. This is back in the time of tents and having sheep out there and having all the stuff that they're going through and the way they live. Very different, very, very much not who we are. But yes, I found myself watching the story thinking the same, very similar in terms of like, man, I could see that youthfulness of growing and wanting to mature, wanting to be brave and to follow God's heart.
Yeah.
And
he looked up to his brothers.
Yeah, I remember. Well, I remember many times, being my 14, 15, 16, those years being critical and pivotal for me of learning what following God looked like, and trying to walk that out daily and failing and getting back up again. And, and like that whole process. And so I think that is, for me, it was very relatable. I could see if somebody was strictly looking at the cultural differences of now versus then, okay, maybe so. But I think anybody with a filter of what really they're trying to do, what they're trying to tell, story they're trying to tell, I think it tells the story very well, and it gives you a chance where you feel like you're pulling into, you're there in the middle of that time frame. So then your mind says, oh man, this is around me. This is what's happening.
Yeah, and I think that right at the beginning of the series, each episode they have a disclaimer that says, look, essentially, and I'm going to summarize it, but look, we did our best to keep this close to the biblical narrative. However, there is some creative license taken because you don't know the conversations. The Bible doesn't tell us in-depth conversations. Now, you've noted a few things like when Samuel says, "Why do I hear sheep in bawling in my ears?" Those are things that are taken from the Bible, or that God looks on the on the heart, while man looks on the outward appearance. When he goes to size up Jesse's sons, and he's going to each one of them, and he just obviously God's like, nope, and he's like, do you have any more sons? Because he's like, what's happening here?
It's like something's not right.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I will say one of my favorite parts was when they did call David, spoiler alert, just a little bit. But when he gets David there and he prays and he feels like, yes, this is who God has chosen. And then he just starts to laugh. And he's like, oh, the Almighty has a sense of humor. Like, of course he picks the least of them. But see, that's God's MO. I mean, think about Gideon. Think about Moses. Moses is like, I can't talk well. I'm going to need my brother to help me. You think of all throughout. He picked from the least of the tribes. He picked the least in the family that's in the tribe. And the shepherd boy that his dad was like, well, I'm not even going to call him in because he's not considered. So I think that there is a great challenge taking biblical stories and bringing them to the screen and trying to stay true to, the biblical the narrative, but at the same time, creating something that is a worthwhile imagery film and that sort of thing that gives you that ability to really dive in and understand and love, the story. And for those that don't have a biblical worldview or they don't really understand how that's all kind of lined together. I mean, we've seen and we've had in the past. I mean, we all, I think, cringed when the Noah film came out many years ago. We won't go there. But for those of you that want something that you can share with your friends, believers and non-believers, I'm going to say first 3 episodes, I give it a thumbs up. Now, I will say that over the next coming weeks and months, we're going to work to find out and get more info and bring to our podcast audience about that and talk. Of course, we're going to be talking about some other really great faith-based films as well. Any concluding thoughts from you, Stephen?
No, I think I'm excited to see this. I think as it comes out more, I think we should do some more, kind of going the journey together. We invite our audience to kind of come along with us on this journey of listening and watching and kind of just, thinking about what we can learn from it. Again, it's always a great way to learn what the Bible really applies to us. And so our challenge would be, as we, as you mentioned earlier, live out the leadership, learn what the leadership in the Christian biblical way looks like. And that definitely is not your own kingdom. That's the thing I would say, is that building your own kingdom is setting yourself up for failure. Building God's kingdom is always the best way. And I think that's the way that this story is telling it, is that even in Samuel, when he's talking, comes in there and talks, he says, it's not your kingdom, Saul.
Yeah.
It's God's kingdom. It's God's, what God's given to you. And so reminding ourselves of that, we anything we do, anything in greatness and in excellence, that's got to be excellence as stewarding what he has called and given us to do, not in our own name or own ways. I think so. That's just it's a great reminder. Whether you're a pastor, whether you're building your own business, whether you're building speaking engagement, consulting, whatever you're doing, or heck, leading a family. I mean, it's still stewarding Both of our kids, we have lots of kids between the two of us, and both of our kids, all of our kids are still God's, and we are stewarded to be steward them as parents.
Yeah,
and I think that same kind of concept applies.
Well, the series is House of David, and for those of you that may be tuned in a little late, or you're listening to us on Pray.com, on Pray Radio, House of David is on Prime. It's an Amazon MGM release, and we give it 2 thumbs up, and we hope that you will decide for yourself. As we said in the beginning, as they say in the financial world, do your own research. It is rated. It's rated for 13 and above. Yeah. And so, because of thematic elements, that could be scary. I mean, Goliath is legit. So, if you've got small children, we want to put that little disclaimer in there. Right. And I will say that we want to hear feedback from you. So, if you are following us on social media, we have of course, our Instagram page. We're on Facebook. And we're also on X, and we want to, when this is posted, we want to hear from you. Tell us what you think.
Yeah,
give us your opinion. We want to get your feedback. And if you like us doing these kind of shows where we talk about faith-based, we talk about films, and there's a number of new films coming out over the next few weeks. You're going to hear us talking about some other really exciting series and movies that are coming this spring and this summer, and we're going to have opportunity to talk with some of the developers, producers, and directors and actors that are involved in those. And so we want to know if this is something that you, as the listener, like. Share this with your friends, and if you are watching on YouTube, be sure you hit that bell and you hit subscribe, and you watch out for a new episode that we drop every single Tuesday. And I will tell you, in the next few weeks, we got some exciting shows coming up, some really great guests, some great authors, and we're excited to have that shared with you. So as we get ready to end here, I did want to ask you, Stephen, what do you think is what's a story from your growing up that you are hopeful? Maybe the folks over at Wonder Project are listening. They're checking us out to see if we dogged their series. What's a series? What's a story you would like to see on? Maybe it's been done before, but you would like maybe somebody in that world. And we have a lot of friends that are in the faith and film business.
Well, I think that honestly, truthfully, David is one of those that I had wanted to see done well. And so first of all, I'll just say that really excited me to see that done with excellence and to achieve that. If there's another one, I think probably, I think in light of, the technology and the way that we're approaching these things with excellence, I think the story of the flood, I think, could be another really interesting one to go back into. Telling a story, because even in the sense of Goliath, I've heard some good studies on interesting things, facts of maybe the size of how big Noah and them might have been. There's some teasers on were they normal sized guys, or were they more in the larger stature men able to build an ark like that over the course of 1,000 years, whatever it was, 100 years.
Yeah.
So just, I think that could be a very interesting, portrayal, and you have people mocking them and making that whole story very intriguing, and staying steadfast to something you're called to do. So that's, for me, I think that'd be very interesting. And also in light of what we have in what Tennessee, they've done a really good job of portrayal. So a lot of people are familiar with the size of the ark and what it would have looked like. And so there's a little more familiarity with that, a little more grasp of what it would have possibly been like to be on the ark in those days. How about you?
Yeah. This was a tough one. I thought about this when I formed this question before the show.
I hope so.
Yeah, and this is a tough one for me because there's actually a couple that come to mind. I think the obvious one, that I would say would be Samson. Samson and Delilah, but telling the story throughout and all the things, and of course the tragic end that it was. But you could also, I think you can make a case for a really well done. The three Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. The man in the fourth man in the fire, but obviously Daniel in the lion's den, and all that happened in captivity in Babylon. I think would be a fun one as well. And and then there's some other great ones in there that, the Old Testament is full of some incredible incredible stories. Gideon comes to mind. I mean, you could do an incredible one on Nehemiah, and there's some lesser characters that have just some really amazing stories from that era.
What about the belly of a whale?
Jonah.
Jonah.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a good one. And then you could go fast forward to the New Testament, which I know there's another series that's doing a good job of this part, sort of thus far. Is maybe the apostles? Trying to tell stories about following. You could have a whole series on each season. Would be on one of the.
What could you do with Paul? One of the missionary journeys.
Yeah, exactly. Paul alone, or and of course, obviously, a lot of their portrayal of being willing to stand up for that truth and up to the point of up to death. And so, I think each of those could be amazing storylines, and they're all based upon the truth of the Bible, which is what draws us in to say, God's word is true and it's powerful. Mm-hmm. And I think Isaiah 22 says it's sharper than a two-edged sword, cutting us like a knife, laying us wide open, that we were wide open before Him. And so let those stories be that truth to us. That'd be good.
Well, I'll have to say this is, who cares what we think? We want to hear from the listeners. We want to hear from the viewers. What would you like to see made into it? And because, you might be onto something. And so put it in the comments. And I want to remind you that if you haven't checked out our page on pray.com, go to pray.com/GEB America. We've got some great video content there. Of course, all of the podcasts are there, and they come out each and every time that they're dropped. Of course, we do the 2 podcasts that come out every single week. And then special features, short episodes, and special, added benefit videos. We want you to get in on that, and we want to get your feedback. And if you haven't followed us on YouTube, our YouTube is growing like crazy, and we want you to subscribe and hit the bell and join us there. And then you can find Stephen and I on social media, both of us. Stephen, you're under, what's your Instagram real quick?
The Coach Stephen.
And that's PH.
PH. Yeah, the
Coach Stephen, and I'm the Dave Groves on Instagram. And you can follow us on GEB America social media as well. Just search in your favorite, including Pinterest, and you can search for GEB America or GEB Network, and you will be updated on everything that we're doing. And we've got some really great guests, great shows coming up in the next few weeks, and we want you to not miss out. Share them with your friends, share them with your family, share them with those that don't know about the Bible and about Jesus and this incredible faith walk that we all are part of. And Stephen, thanks for joining me today. It was kind of
this was fun.
Fun thing. I think it was different. For those of you who are like, why aren't you in the studio? Well, we decided to do this kind of kind of an unplugged almost, except not unplugged, and just have a conversation about what we think is a fun new series on Prime, The House of David. And for those of you that this is your first time joining us, be sure to like and follow, and we thank you for joining us, of course, every single week, those of you that are diehards and never miss. And I appreciate your time with us, Stephen. And for those of you that want to hear some more good interviews, let us know who those you would like to have on. And we'll be back with some guest interviews next week and the week after. And until then, thanks for joining us on the GEB America podcast, and we'll see you next time.